Welcome to Building Research Relevance. My name is Stephen Shaw. I'm the chair of the Department of Educational and Counseling Psychology at McGill University. And in this session of Building Research Relevance, we're going to talk about asking the right questions, or really just asking questions. Science is about answering questions. Relevant science is about solving problems. They're very similar in nature. But asking questions is the most important part of science. It's not the answering questions. We teach people how to answer questions, but it's the asking of the question sets the terms for the search for advancing truth. And I always get a kick out of the journalists, or I shouldn't say journalists, but they're more pundits who have a political view, and they may often apologize for their difficult questions as just asking questions. Well, this is disingenuous because it's the asking questions that are the most important thing. It's not something that I'm just asking questions to put it out there as if there's some kind of faux skeptic. That's all they are. They're fake skeptics when you say that. Very disingenuous. Answering the question is not important. Setting the terms for finding truth or getting an answer is the important thing. So it's the asking questions, whether it's journalism or science. Asking the questions is the key. This is what takes the most effort. Asking the right questions will lead you in the right direction. When I have students come to me and say, I want to know what kind of analysis to use, as in statistical analysis, what kind of analysis should I use to answer the data? The answer is very simple. It's, what's your question? I never really understood it when people say, I want to do a structural equation model, or I want to do qualitative types of methods using interviews. So what's your question? Not all methods work for all problems, which should be obvious, but it's really not. And so what we really need to do is be better at answering the questions. Let me bring that back. Be better at asking the right questions, asking the questions that move us ahead. If research is going to be relevant, it has to have a lot of components. One is credibility. 2, it has to advance theory. 3, it has to advance knowledge. 4, if it's a clinically oriented research, it needs to advance practice. And then 5, the last, let's see, is that right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then the 5th one is communicating effectively with a story. That's what I want to see in research. Is it credible? In other words, are your methods sound? Does it advance theory? Does it advance knowledge? Does it advance practice? And is it communicated effectively in a story? That's not an or. I don't want any one of those. I need to have all 5 of them. If you have all 5 of those, you actually have research that can be relevant. And so that's what you're really focusing on. When we leave out theory, it's really hard to ask good questions. If we're not advancing knowledge and moving things ahead, then what are we even doing here? Advancing practice is the only one that's semi-optional, because sometimes you are looking for basic research or really focusing heavily on advancing theory and not so much on advancing clinical practice. So that one is the only optional one among those 5. So I want to see all of them. I want to see all of it put together. And we don't teach people how to do this. We teach them statistical analysis. You get infinite varieties of ANOVA and infinite varieties of regression. That's fantastic. It's good to have tools. The more tools you have, actually it does help you ask better questions if you have a lot of tools. Sometimes we don't ask questions because we have no idea how to answer those questions, so we just stay away. So more tools are good, but if it's all tools and none of the how, when, why to use the tools, then they do become functionally useless. I honestly still don't get the people who say, I am a qualitative researcher and that's the best way to go. No, it just isn't. You're just wrong. It is, in fact, one of many ways to go that answers a certain specific subset of questions, just like quantitative analysis. I have people want to do a structural equation model. When I hear what their question is, I go, well, that should just be a t-test. Questions lead to analysis, not the other way around, although it's good to have both. One of my colleagues and friends, mostly Twitter fan, but we've met in real life a couple of times, Raul Pacheco Vega, who has a wonderful blog. I do strongly recommend his blog. He got away from it for a while. He's coming back, so his blogs are fantastic. But he has a really good one about how to get people to ask the right questions. And one of his first things, he comes from this Anselm Strauss approach, which is, what is this a story of? And some of our folks, especially those who tend to do more sophisticated modeling and more sophisticated statistical thing, they're so much into the technical aspects of it, they kind of forget to step back a little bit and go, what are you trying to demonstrate? What are you trying to prove? And if you have to look at the data to figure out what you're trying to look at, that's kind of asked backwards. You know what you're looking for, and then you can find it. But if you're just hunting for something that looks interesting, I hate to say it, that's not real research. That's a fishing expedition. That's just not very useful. When I have a student say they want to use a Mancova, I know it's a fishing expedition. It's really hard to develop a good question that addresses some of the things that the multiple analysis of covariance can do. But what is this a story of? What story are you trying to tell? Once you have that, it becomes easier to say, what questions do I need to ask? That is ultimately what research is about. And so tell the story. I really like that. I know Raul talked about that in his blog. It's really smart. It's something to always back up. Yes, once you get into answering that specific question, once you ask the question, you can work on how do you answer it. That's when you get into the technical details of, is your analysis correct? Are you making the right decisions when it comes to analyzing the data? That comes later, but that comes all in service of what is the story? What is the question you're trying to answer? Everything's in service of that, not find the methods, then figure out what your question is or what you're trying to know. That doesn't work that way. That leads to some really bad questions, really bad findings. Doesn't help theory, doesn't help knowledge, doesn't help practice. And it's impossible to communicate. And if you communicate it, it's usually disingenuous. I found this thing. Therefore, here was my question. Hypotheses after results are known is almost uniformly a bad idea. So think about it before you even get started. In your literature review, what is this a story of? That question will be shaped as your literature review moves on, as you look at the deeper theories, as you look at maybe competition among theories or between theories, maybe advancing a practice that may not work very well. It's what's this the story of? What problem are you trying to solve? And always step back. This is one of the most helpful things I find, is to really step back even from your own specific field. I often find that some of the best ideas I have had is from stepping back from my own narrow ideas and getting ideas from other fields. We just did a paper, submitted for publication, so I won't talk too much about it, but it's a paper that we actually stole all the methods from management. And I don't think of business management as a high watermark of high quality research methods. I mean, I'm a psychologist, I shouldn't talk, but they're usually not great methods. But in fact, they used a methodology that was so helpful, we just applied the exact same methodology from management and put it into psychology and found it really worked well. So broad phenomenon, even if it's across data, step back from what you're doing. Figure out what story are you trying to tell, what theories are you trying to test, what theories are you trying to expand, what knowledge are you trying to add to the field. If you're not adding to the field, why bother? What are you even doing? So you have to really have this really strong, broad, wide, and fairly deep knowledge base in order to really understand how the work you're doing interacts with other people's research, other people's theories. And this is really important. As a journal editor, I got a lot of papers that pretty much correlated the results of one test with the results of another test. I don't care. That's always a hard review to write for a paper when someone provides these data and you just couldn't care any less about what they're doing, because it's not useful. It's not answering any question. or any problem. It's not useful. If it's not useful, it's not really science. And I don't care how complex your model is and how impressive it is. There could be all sorts of data blizzards coming at you from multiple ways. A senior colleague once told me, he said, you can slice bologna with a scalpel and BS with a laser, but it's still bologna and BS. Ultimately, let's not get too carried away with the methods. Let's make the methods as simple as they can be in order to answer the question. The more simple your methods are to answer the question. Now, sometimes your questions are super complex and it requires a super complex type of analysis. Perfectly fine. But make sure that's the question that's driving the bus. Theory-driven research is a key. As I mentioned in this before, and I'll just keep hitting on this again until people actually believe me, there's nothing more relevant than research that is theory-driven or theory-based. If you don't have a real, what we would call a theory, remember, theories are not hunches. They're actually the most sophisticated aspect of science that usually integrates dozens, if not hundreds or thousands of facts are integrated into a theory so we can make data useful. So if you don't even have a well thought out theory, developing a model is the second best approach. A model that's either a mathematical model or a model which you can draw in a picture. If you can do that, that's the second best thing to a theory. Now, sometimes those go together. Sometimes you don't have a good big theory for what you're doing. Some of your ideas might have been inspired from clinical work or things of that nature. So develop a model, a picture, a mathematical model. Once you have a picture that you're testing or a mathematical model, that can eventually lead to theory development. And that is an awesome part of research. Advances knowledge and advances theory. When we do this, we're really talking about how we make it relevant. We make it relevant by expanding our worlds. That's why I never really trust the folks who are truly, let's just say, psychometricians by nature. They provide excellent tools to help us solve problems, but they don't solve problems in and of themselves. So that sounded kind of harsh towards that line of work, but I think the tools are there. But ultimately, what we have to do is ask the questions. Ask the questions that are important, that are relevant to us, that are relevant to the clients that we serve. That's how we get things going. And so thinking a lot about what question you're asking it's going to indicate how good your research is. Quite often, when you go collect data, you go back to your question that you think you did really well, and you find out that the data don't really fit the question. That's horrible. That's a bad feeling. But so you want to spend at least half the time you're involved in research. Of course, that's a gross estimate. But at least half the amount of time you want to spend asking the question. Really spending the time studying, really going into it. Because what you'll find is when you invest in asking the right question, what you'll find is answering the question becomes so much easier. The problem with research right now, and why methods, measurement, analysis is so difficult, is because often we don't even know what we're looking for. When you don't know what you're looking for, it's really hard to find it. Or I should say, maybe that's backwards. When you don't know what you're looking for, it's easy to find anything. Right now, we have to focus on our research on answering questions, solving problems. Do that, and your methods will be easy, your measurement will be much better, your analysis will be much clearer, and you'll be able to tell the story that communicates what you found effectively. Once you're doing that, now you have research that is both useful, accurate, and relevant. Thanks very much, and I will be back to you next time on Building Research Relevance.